All right, welcome back to All Day Live Tuesday afternoon. Yesterday we showed you some video out of Wisconsin, just west of Madison, Wisconsin, at Ridglan Farms. This is a facility that's been in the news quite a bit recently, but it goes back a few years as well. They bred beagles for biomedical research. It was the site of a couple of protests as activists tried to rescue some of these dogs. Now it is a site where these dogs are going out to other animal rescue groups, and Ridglan Farms is effectively shutting down. Let's bring in WITI Chief Investigative Reporter Bryan Polcyn, who's been on this a lot. I saw you out there yesterday as well. Let's start with the most recent event here yesterday and what was happening out there.
Well, this is the one that everybody is obviously gravitating to because it's the happy ending, right? Another 475 beagles were released as part of a negotiated agreement by a rescue group called Big Dog Ranch Rescue out of Florida. They're in the Palm Beach area, which is not far from Mar-a-Lago, and that's important because they have a relationship with the Trump administration and some powerful people in Washington that have had some hands in this. But that release of the 475 dogs, these are dogs that have been in cages their entire lives. They were bred to be used in science experiments, to be used as part of the country's biomedical research industry. And they have been doing this there for more than 60 years. This latest negotiated agreement, it's a purchase of 475, is the last of the dogs that remain at Ridgeland Farms. Over the last couple of months, this group and another called Center for a Humane Economy have both been involved in purchases of dogs from Ridgeland Farms, totaling more than 2,100 beagles that are now being prepared for or already fostered out and adopted out all across the country.
Yeah, we're seeing some of the video here, and I think that's from 2017. So as we go back through that history, what was that original, rescue attempt going back now 9 years ago?
What you mentioned that, this has been going on there for years. They've been breeding these beagles since 1966 because beagles are really docile and they make great models for scientific research. But in 2017, this has all gone on essentially behind closed doors for all these years. Nobody's really known about it or talked about it until activists went in 2017. There were a small number of them from a group called Direct Action Everywhere that went inside, got that video you just saw, and essentially published that for the world to see. They broke in. They committed what Ridgeland Farms said was a crime. What ultimately prosecutors charged them with was a crime. But those crimes were dismissed, those charges were dismissed because Ridgeland Farms said, we're getting death threats, too much publicity. And that wasn't until 2021 they finally said, let's drop the case. And ultimately, the activists that went in 2017 turned the tables. They said, we won our day in court. We actually wanted to go to trial over this because we want the world to know about it. So they went back and they petitioned the court for a special prosecutor to investigate animal cruelty at Ridgeland Farms. That special prosecutor was appointed in January of 2025, and that's when this whole movement really built momentum.
Yeah, because we've got some other video clips here from both March and April of this year when there was a rescue effort in March, another one in April that brought out law enforcement. So tell us about, first of all, what we saw happen in the middle of March.
So what you see here, March 15th, this was what the organizer, the guy right there with the crowbar, Wayne Shung, he's an animal rights activist, actually a former professor at Northwestern University, a lawyer, a longtime activist, though. He organized this saying, we've just got to go in and get the dogs. We've got to go in and get as many out as we can. They went sort of a day earlier than they had publicly advertised, a little bit of an element of surprise. They were able to get 22 beagles out. This video gained national attention and really international attention on this facility because you see them hauling these beagles away. Alexandra Paul, former Baywatch actress, was one of those who went in. That helped get this a lot of attention. But they only got 22 dogs out of more than 2,000. Wayne Shung and others ultimately were arrested and charged with crimes. But he wasn't deterred because he said, we're going to go back. And he recruited more than 1,000 people, as you see here, that descended upon Ridgeland Farms in April, attempting to do the same thing. This time, there was no element of surprise. Police were ready. 17 law enforcement agencies were there with tear gas and pepper spray and rubber bullets, and the activists did not remove a single dog. What they did do, though, is they got even more attention. And groups like Big Dog Ranch Rescue, Center for Humane Economy saw this and said there's got to be a better way. Let's go in and let's negotiate with these people. They believed Ridgeland Farms saw the writing was on the wall, that there's a shift in the way things are going to be done in America when it comes to animal testing, a shift away from animal research. And they said, let's treat them like businessmen. Let's go in and say, we'll pay for these dogs so we can get them to rescues, get them to loving homes, and you can still cash out a little bit of money on the way out of this line of work.
Yeah, so this wasn't some sort of court action, I guess, that led to Ridgeland Farms shutting down. You're saying this was a negotiated agreement with other humane groups to say, okay, we'll come to an end.
Was, though, the court actions and the state actions gave them leverage.
Okay.
And the biggest piece was a settlement that occurred. The investigation of possible criminal charges was ultimately settled in the fall of 2025, and that is where Ridgeland Farms agreed to avoid criminal charges for some of these surgeries they had performed without the proper anesthesia and other things, more than 300 violations. They said, instead of facing criminal charges, we'll give up our license to breed and sell dogs in Wisconsin as of July 1st, 2026. And that's when the activists said, okay, great, but what about the 2,000 dogs that are still there? That's what prompted these so-called open rescue efforts. Ridgeland Farms would call them crimes. That's what prompted it, and ultimately led to these other groups getting involved.
Yeah, and then yesterday I think I saw you with, we're looking at a beagle now. I mean, some of them are running around super playful, and some of them look a little bit, I guess, shell-shocked. Yeah, there you are with one of the beagles.
That one was awfully friendly. I had to move the flap there to make sure we could see what was going on. But no, sweet, sweet animals. And that was one that had been cowering in the corner, clearly not as playful as some of the others. Each of these dogs responds differently. They've lived their entire lives in a cage. They haven't touched grass before. They haven't been in the sunshine, and many of them really haven't had a lot of loving touches other than maybe someone coming to visit their cage to do, a health check or a little bit of socialization, but they don't get out like this. So some responded joyfully, others were clearly really still nervous and scared, and it'll take some time to adjust.
It's very much like a canine culture shock for many of them. So what happens now? I mean, where do we stand with the court cases against those who broke in as activists? And where do we stand with the timeline for the farm to be entirely free of beagles and, I guess, ceasing operation?
Questions all around. First of all, I'll start with the legal part of it. The activists who went in, Wayne Chung and a few of the others, are facing felony charges for the burglary and break-in at Ridgeland Farms on April 18th. Well, on both March 15th and April 18th, the attempt on the 18th. And so they still have court cases. I believe Wayne Chung, who was essentially the ringleader of all this, he's got the most high-profile trial that is scheduled right now for September, though the state recently asked for a delay in that process and in the discovery process. So we'll see if that actually comes to fruition. Wayne Chung wants his day in court, by the way. He wants to play out the trial over animal welfare, even though he obviously faces potential prison time for those felonies. In the meantime, what about Ridgeland Farms? So there are still, I think they got 200 dogs out yesterday, another 125 coming out today, and then 150 dogs are going to remain behind because, as we are told, there is still some sort of experiment or contract research that is going on at Ridgeland Farms that they say they need to complete on those 150 animals, mostly puppies. And when that is complete, they will then adopt the dogs out. They have assured, according to Big Dog Ranch Rescue, they have assured the rescue organizations that the dogs will not be harmed, that these are not painful experiments, and that there won't be any sort of life-altering testing done on them, but whatever measurements they need to do over the next 6 weeks or so will take place before they are ultimately adopted out. And then, according to Big Dog Ranch, Lori Simmons, their CEO and founder, she said they have it in a binding contract that Ridgeland Farms will permanently close. And that's a big deal for people who've been watching this because while they lost their breeding license as of July 1st, they still have a federal research license. And the belief had been that they would continue to do in-house research at Ridgeland Farms, paid for by outside organizations, which meant they could still breed dogs in-house, they just couldn't sell them. Now that seems to be going away as well. They are going to be closing permanently. So
closing, and any idea what becomes of the property itself? I mean, is this a company that sort of ceases to exist, or an operation that ceases to exist? Did they sell? I mean, is there any answers to that at this point?
Right now, no, those are good questions. I think a lot of people are wondering what happens to that giant facility. We do know that not only that facility, but many of the properties in that area are owned by family members of those who are connected to Ridglan Farms. So they own a lot of land in that area. I think the lead veterinarian, Rick Van Domelen, is the chair of the town board, and the town constable is like his brother-in-law or something to that effect. So there's a lot of influence in that area. I don't know that family's just going to up and move and go away. What will they do with the facility? That remains to be seen.
Okay.
But so far as we know, Ridgeland Farms as an entity has agreed it's going to shut down completely.
All right. Bryan Polcyn, WITI, Chief Investigative Reporter, who's been on this so much, and again, right in the thick of it, too, as we saw from yesterday, for sure. Thanks so much for your time.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. We'll check back with you again if there's updates down the line.
Of course.
All right.